Hi everyone, my name is Dominic and I would like to welcome you to the 8th ever Solvio regular call. So without further ado, let's get started. So Solvio currently has 2 open positions on AngelList. The first one is for a lead front-end developer, and we get quite a lot of applications there, but since currently we didn't have problems with front-end, I wasn't really getting in touch with everyone. That has kind of changed, and we'll go over that in the latter part of the call in a point called challenges. And the second position we have is one called mathematician and functional programmer. And again, I was getting much less, but still a good number of applications there, maybe 10 or so overall. Some of the people, so none of the people that I had an actual interview with, none of the people seemed interesting enough until now for that position. There were some people that seemed interesting from sort of an artificial intelligence, data science, NLP perspective, which could be valuable for a company, but no one that I saw like would be the right person for the Pruvio project. That all changed a few days ago when we got a really good application from a recent graduate from the University of Cambridge. And with that, I'd like to welcome Louis Garfinkel to the team. How's it going? You want to say a few words about yourself?
Hi, yeah, so I'm Louis, or Louis really, but it doesn't really matter. Yeah, I graduated from Cambridge in June. I sort of mostly did quite pure mathematics, so foundational stuff, which seems useful for the direction we want to go with Pruvio. I wasn't in the Pruvio product call yesterday, so I don't quite know what was decided, but I'm keen to help out. Yeah, I'm really excited about the project.
Awesome, that's really terrific. So with that, maybe I'll give you a very brief introduction to the team, and then we'll go on to the history of Solvio. Or let's do it the other way around. Let's discuss the history of Solvio. So
sure.
Why do I want to discuss that? It's because, yeah, I think it makes sense to at some point do a checkpoint and also talk about sort of what we've accomplished so far and where we're heading. Even before I get into that, I recently went to 2 conferences which were extremely inspiring, and I think I preliminarily decided that we want to start doing the regular calls again, and we want to again start using our discourse. So without further ado, I think we can begin, and that's why right now we have a regular call after like 2 months. The idea of the regular calls is sort of a checkpoint or a summary for anyone that's interested in what we're doing. And it used to occur every 2 weeks on Sunday, and I believe that is a format that is the best. Why? Because Sunday evening is probably the freest time. It's the smallest chance that people are out doing stuff, and so everybody can spare 30 to 60 minutes to jump on a call and talk about the meta status of the project. History of Solvio. So the first point, all of you guys know, the motivation began as sort of a peer-to-peer network of students and teachers. And the context behind this was I was running a math camp company entitled Oxbridge Science College. And essentially what we were doing is we were organizing like tutoring courses for IB mathematics, and we were getting like really good reviews. Like essentially pretty much you can even see them here. I copy pasted every single review from Facebook, and they're like every single one of them is 5 stars except for like some trolls. Essentially what I was realizing was that people learned better in my courses, and more specifically in intensive courses. This also follows my own personal experience. I learned most of my mathematics at a place called Awesome Math Camp, where I was a student, and later on I also was a TA, a teaching assistant and later on I was an instructor. So 2010, I attended as a student. 2014, I attended as a TA. And 2015, I attended as an instructor. Another sort of parallel in my life would be my time at Oxford, which was kind of short-lived, but nevertheless, I learned a lot of lessons from there. The way that Oxford and Cambridge terms work is they are only 8 weeks long. So compared to a traditional university where you have semester-long terms, which last, a semester, so whatever that means, I don't know, 5 months. Oxbridge has trimesters, but they only last 8 weeks. So what that means, the consequence is there's a lot of vacation, but once you're there, you have to work really, really hard. And essentially, that's very similar to an intensive course. And also, you don't take that many subjects during the trimester, of course. You take maybe 4 subjects. So if you think about it, 4 subjects in 8 weeks, that's very similar to something like Awesome Math, which was 2 subjects for 2.5 weeks. The subjects were either combinatorics, algebra, geometry, or number theory. And you could pick level 1, which was sort of middle school / high school, level 2, which was like end of high school, like very talented students, or level 3, which was IMO training for the International Mathematical Olympiad. I did Algebra 2 and Number Theory 2 as a student, and then I TA'd Algebra 2, Algebra 3, NT2, and Combo 2. And when I was an instructor, I had a class, Algebra 2. Anyways, enough about me, old man's nostalgia. So, yeah, that's where this first idea was. So it's essentially like the product that we now call Course Hunt, which is this idea of being able to find tutors and short-term courses, etc., around the world, and equivalently for teachers to be able to set up tutoring and short-term courses around the world and have a unified liquidity. That was the very first idea of Solvio. I think somewhere in between, I realized that credentials are very important. Again, like these first few things before I started working full time on the project, I can't really remember the ordering, but yeah, somewhere along the way, I also realized that credentialing is very important, which we currently call the Solvio product. I quit the math company and I decided to learn to code, which I was inspired by a trip I made to Silicon Valley. The trip was called Oxford Entrepreneurs Silicon Valley Trip, and I think it took place in February of 2017. And that was incredibly inspiring. And I got back, and essentially a few weeks after I closed the company, and April of 2017, I started learning to code. And that was the roots of the product that we currently call Amos. It was really, really cumbersome and difficult for me to find learning resources that would be good for my skill level. In particular, at that point in time, I didn't know Git, I didn't know Shell, and turns out every single documentation sort of assumes you know Bash or Shell, Git. Today, it would be maybe the other way around. I know a lot of programming concepts, and at any stage you are, you always want to find the resources that are appropriate for your skill level. Actually, the very first idea of Amos was like just a very simple search engine that would aggregate results. And actually, we implemented this. So, do you guys remember? Anna, do you remember the very first version of Amos that was even live? for a few
Yeah, yeah.
days. Yeah, I'm not gonna show it because I would have to. It's not live anymore. I mean, it might be on on Heroku, but I don't know the Heroku domain. Actually, I think I do. I think it was called amoslookup.heroku.com. See if it's still active. Oh, that's annoying. Let's just try Amos. See if
It would be there on GitHub, I guess.
where?
GitHub.
On Gitter. What do you mean by Gitter?
GitHub.
Oh, on GitHub. Yeah, it's on GitHub, but I was trying to see if it's also like deployed. We could host it on GitHub pages, but whatever. Yeah, but you're totally right. If you look up on GitHub Amos Lookup, then you will see the thing, and it's just a single page application. It's an SPA, which just has one functionality. You type in anything that you want to learn, like a topic, and it will essentially open up a bunch of windows, which you can also choose what you want to open up. And the windows are like the query searched on Google, searched on Wikipedia, searched on Coursera, on Udemy, etc. Because when I was learning to code, I realized like it was a pain. It was a pain point, user pain point, having to go to Udemy and look up React, having to go to Coursera, look up React, and having to go to Google and look up React. There wasn't a single entry point where I would be able to find all the resources in one app. That was actually the original idea, and this was then implemented somewhere, I think, maybe over here. So let's write that down. Let's look up. Cool. Again, somewhere along the way, I got the idea for Pruvio. I don't remember when. And the first time that I started systematizing my thoughts were with this document called Building Lernaza Part 1. Actually, that's incorrect. The first time was the white paper. So not sure if you guys know, but we actually have a white paper, and you can find it by going to Everyone and clicking the Google Drive link. And so this I wrote in April of 2018. And I was going to the Bay Area at that point, like just for vacation. The only person who goes to Silicon Valley for vacation. And I wanted to get something in writing in order to sort of do a moonshot where I would send it to big VCs and big incubators, and maybe they would reply. Of course, they didn't, but it was nevertheless extremely useful to spend 2 weekends bashing out my thoughts on paper. And I think the white paper still holds. The only reason we haven't updated it yet is because it's actually pretty good. The only thing that's changed is the names of the products. So Content Hunt is now Amos, Problem Hunt is now Pruvio, etc. After that, the second time I put my thoughts into writing was, again, what's it called? Content Hunt got renamed to Lernaza, which later became Amos. So I wrote this thing called Building Lernaza, where I try to sort of create a algebraic structure, or maybe better term, data structure for the application. So I wanted to see if it's actually possible to do something like that. And it's a little bit more complex than what we're using now, but not by a lot. We're pretty much using the same thing that is written over here. Sometime again, like maybe, yeah, just sometime I started implementing the first Pruvio code in JavaScript. In January of this year, I told my company Gnosis that I will be working part-time, like from March or something. and they said yes, but then they didn't like it, and we kind of agreed to what's the right word? Leave, separate, disconnect. And so, in other words, that was great news because from early April, I think from April 1st actually, or no, April 2nd, I began working on Solvio full time. One of the very first things I did for some reason, literally, is I started implementing Preview code in Reason, which is this sort of JavaScript developer-friendly syntax for OCaml, which is a very old and mature language using the functional paradigm. Then I implemented Amos Lookup, which you can see what it is by doing git clone Amos Lookup, npm install, npm start. And finally, I posted something on AngelList, and I think it was called like Technical Co-Founder. Yeah, that's what it was called, right, Ani? And we got some people that remained part of the project. April time, we had a lot of calls. They're all on YouTube. We used to publish everything back then. And we were mainly just talking about and discussing the game theoretical model of the application. And we decided on something called like a reputation model. We went on to do the designs first in first in we actually have here in Whimsical was the app we were initially using. And then later on, I think at the beginning of my trip to US, or I think it was after actually, we decided to switch to Sketch. So I redid everything in Sketch, which is the current designs, how they are right now. Oh, and then also somewhere over here, even before we returned from US, we also finally got our logo, which is something that we worked on throughout this period. But only the third iteration of the logo was something that we liked. So let's go back. So we made the designs. Evgeny told us that he'll be less available going forward. So again, I went on AngelList for the second time, and I approached a bunch of people, actually, maybe 40 or so people, looking for a lead front-end developer, and almost everybody replied. Almost everybody replied positively. So I had like something like 9 interviews in 2 days, even more. And I was just doing the interviews where people actually booked a call with me. I wasn't even replying to those who didn't. And I think a few people were active at first, like Pavla and Sultan, but at the end of the day, the only one that remained was Sultan. I went to US on June 19, and we decided to transition to GraphQL. So I spent like the first week or so doing a really deep dive into GraphQL. I was kind of a Focus-Mate junkie back then. I was doing like 10 sessions of these, 10 sessions like per day. If you guys haven't heard of Focus-Mate, try it out. It's pretty cool. And then I was focused on learning Sketch, and we did the designs, which currently look like this. See if this still up. Yeah, so the designs currently look. And also at the startup Basecamp where I was staying, one friend created the current version of the Solvio logo. So that's really cool. I got back to Prague and we transitioned back to REST. we also, I worked on the front end for a little bit, and then we sort of pivoted a little. I don't remember exactly when that was. It was maybe July, like end of July approximately, or like mid-July. And we decided that we're not going to have the reputation model. And the reason is the following. It's a dichotomy. You have to choose either to have the reputation model or to have an open API. And the reason you can't have both is if you want to have a decentralized reputation model, it has to work using a shelling game. And inevitably, the shelling point will be the currently most popular option. In other words, it will lead to sort of like an aggregation effect, not an aggregation effect, but you know what I mean? Like the most popular option will always be the most popular, and it will never change. And so in this sort of dichotomy of whether to have a reputation model or whether to have an open API, we went with the second. And that's been a really good decision, which I'll talk about in a second. I think transitioning to REST, I don't know, it's hard to judge that decision because since right after we changed into an open API, and with an open API, GraphQL is much better. On the other hand, GraphQL is also much bigger uncertainty in that it's much, much more difficult server-side to implement in GraphQL server. And that's essentially what we've been doing in the last month is, so let me back up. So we decided to go with an open API, but we also decided one more thing, which is we're gonna do some initial hydration of the database. And that's pretty much what we've been working on in the last month or so is, let's see if I can open, well, I mean, it's not that important. I don't have to show you the code, but we're working on hydrating the database using anything from Stack Exchange questions, people on Twitter, conferences, products, apps, and lecture notes. And in the end, we sort of, we're working on books. That's what we're spending the most time on recently. And yeah, I will be talking about that in a second. I guess I also forgot a few points here. So somewhere when I was working on part-time for Gnosis, we also attended ETH Paris. Oops, what's going on? Just like for completeness, since this is the history of Solvio, it might as well be complete. We attended ETH Paris, which is a hackathon, where we built the very first version, and you can again find it on our GitHub. And also sometime, I guess over here would be the right place to put it. Some people attended Hack Prague, which was also a hackathon. And there we categorized, I think, every single Oxford Maths Institute lecture notes, and I think every single Cambridge Computer Laboratory lecture notes, as well as resources from Udemy and Coursera. Cool. So one of the challenges I think we faced in the last month was the hydration. It was done by me. And you know, doing that meant the rest of the team was waiting for me. And so the management of the project wasn't that great. And I think I'll get back to this in a second. So then I went to Wikimania. Let's talk about that. Let me just take a sip of coffee. So Wikimania was really, really cool. I arrived on Tuesday, I believe, or Monday. The first 2 days, Wednesday and Thursday, were hackathon. and everybody was working sort of on wiki projects. I also, at that time, I was kind of just doing my own stuff, and I was working on Amos, on the hydration. And I can show you guys at the end of this call what I have, because we haven't connected for a very long time. I met some cool people, programmers initially in the first few days. The hackathon was essentially like either core developers or people who have been in the past core developers of MediaWiki, which is the software that runs all the wikis. They were presenting their projects, and then attendees of the hackathon had the opportunity to connect with them and to hack those projects. So the projects were everything from some very technical stuff. Actually, I think they were all like technical. And by technical, I mean like pretty deep technical. So using NLP for translations. But some were not even, like there was one which was, how do we make it easier to onboard new editors? Which is more like a UX / maybe social thing. And in any case, I didn't work on any of them because I was working on Amos. And I can show you guys that at the end of the call. Friday, the conference began. It was, the keynote. So we essentially started about 1 p.m. And I remember myself going to mainly like one lecture, which was actually in the education track. And it was very, very interesting. It was a guy who essentially had the same idea as Solvio. And the only reason I didn't sort of get in touch with him yet was because we're not yet an education company. Right now we're a search engine company. So it's too soon to work on sort of the real world aspect and implications of our products. And yeah, and I think that was pretty much it for the first day. Then there was like an opening ceremony in like the Stockholm, whatchamacallit, where the head people are based in the city, the city hall. So we had let's see if I got that correct. Translate it, let me check. Yeah, town hall. So we had an opening ceremony in the Stockholm town hall. So essentially the Stockholm hall people, they hosted us. And then day 2 and 3, so Saturday and Sunday, I spent the entire days in one specific track. So guess which track that was? It was research. So research was very, very interesting. And it was essentially a combination of non-technical and technical research. But even the non-technical, every single research team had like some programmer on board, which, you know, the research teams were like university-based. So a programmer meant like somebody from the CS faculty. And then the technical ones, they were like, you know, deep tech. So stuff like machine learning. And that was really, really incredible. I mean, I could talk for the next 3 hours about all of this stuff that I learned there, that I observed there. Let me just say 2 things before we leave Wikimedia. Number 1 is, so on Sunday afternoon, there was this annual presentation, which was called, I think, State of Research, State of Wikipedia Research. And that is every year very, very popular because the format is, it's like 60 minutes. And several people, they present in a very, very lightning format, like 2 minutes each, a paper they have read. And one guy who I later talked to him, he used to be head of research at WMF, the Wikimedia Foundation. He was presenting a paper about a research group in the US that was using machine learning to determine prerequisites of Wikipedia articles. So I really, really liked that talk because that was the first time ever where I saw the concept of systematization of learning prerequisites in another place than the Solvio Foundation. I linked the paper in Amos. So if you scroll to Monday, August 19, you will find a paper on the learning dependencies in Wikipedia. I talked to quite a lot of people at the conference. I'm usually not like extremely social because I also like to go to a lot of the lectures and presentations and really like learn a lot. But this particular conference, I was also doing a lot of what you might call, ABS, always be selling. For example, one of many things, I attended a meetup, which for some reason was attended by like the biggest people in Wikipedia community. The only people that weren't there were Jimmy Wales, the founder, and Catherine, the executive director of WMF. But it was like the people that were there were like head of Wikipedia Hong Kong, head of Wikipedia North America, head of Wikipedia UK, head of research, head of, so it was a really good crowd, and I got to introduce our project in the introduction section where everybody introduced themselves. So from that perspective, it's good to spread the word. And I guess the last thing that stands out in Wikipedia or Wikimania is the intellectual shift or the intellectual effect that it had on me. So I'm super, super happy that I attended that conference. And if I would change anything, I would have attended that conference here when I began working on Solvio full time. In particular, I learned how Wikipedia works. In particular, I learned that licensing is a form of decentralization. So when it comes to building content-based systems, or in general, systems where the marginal cost of distribution, as an economist would say, is zero, which for the moment includes anything that is based on information, such as text, video, music. For these sort of systems, I am more of a fan of a licensing form of decentralization than a monetary form of decentralization. So what am I trying to say? How does Wikipedia work? Very short summary of Wikipedia. Started out as a for-profit company, and they initially had this thing called Nupedia, which was like, there was this super rigorous process to get the article there. After like 9 months, they only had like 100 articles. It was impossible to scale, right? Every 9 months they produced 100 articles. It would take the next 1,000 years for them to reach the current status of Wikipedia. So sometime in January of 2001, they used this software, which used to be called the WikiWeb, and is now called MediaWiki, in order to create a sandbox or a sort of a draft playground for future articles to Nupedia. And this playground was called Wikipedia. And the rest is history. They saw extreme levels of contributions, of attendance. The initial main contributors came from a website which is called Slashdot, and it still exists. I think sort of got replaced by Hacker News. But back in the year 2000, this used to be, am I at the right website? I don't think I am. I think slashdot.com. Oh, okay, it's the same one. Even though it looks like this. This used to be like the the community for programmers and hackers around 2000. What's his name? Jimmy Wales, the founder, he read sort of the manifesto of Richard Stallman, the big figure in free software and hacker culture, and he decided that Wikipedia will have a copyleft license. And that was really revolutionary. Later on, this guy called Sanger, I forget his first name, Sanger, Wikipedia, space, Larry. Larry Sanger, who was also the co-founder of Wikipedia. He was this like PhD level philosopher. He wrote on one of the forums of Wikipedia saying that he sort of lost a job because they don't have funding, but they're considering to introduce ads, in which case he might be able to get some salary. And that caused a massive uproar in the Wikipedia community. Because Wikipedians, I think to this day, it's kind of a left-wing community, very, very left-wing. And people were protesting that you will not put ads on top of my work. In fact, the rebellion got so intense that the Spanish Wikipedia was forked to Encyclopedia Libre, which for the next 2 years had more articles than the Spanish wiki. Long story short, the community forced the organization to adopt no ads ever, free encyclopedia, non-profit model for the rest of its existence. And that's really what allowed it to be so successful. That anything you write on Wikipedia, it's not WMF who holds the copyright. You hold the copyright. And in particular, you're forced to make it free text. Free text is defined as either public license, public domain license, or a copyleft license. And in particular, Wikipedia is copyleft. Let's compare this to a monetary incentivization, such as Everypedia. So Everypedia is blockchain-powered Wikipedia. And I made a hypothesis a few days ago when I was talking about this with someone at DAPCon. I told them Everypedia will never have more articles than Wikipedia. And it's a really interesting prediction, and we'll see what turns out to be true. Everypedia, I don't know the details, I haven't studied it, but yeah, they have a token incentivization system to incentivize people to contribute data, and also, I guess they somehow can make value, economic value from their contributions. My sort of model of thinking is I think software systems should be as simple as possible to accomplish their goal. It's the software equivalent of Occam's razor. And, you know, if we compare the two approaches of a free license model versus a monetary incentivization model, then one of them has been proven to work. It's not an experiment. There are thousands of wikis on the web, and in particular, one of them has over 20 million articles, while the second approach has never been proven to work. And so in that regard, I think it makes sense for Amos to, at least initially, adopt the first approach. Cool. I got back on Monday, and on Tuesday already, last Tuesday, I headed for DAPCon. So DAPCon is a conference organized by Gnosis, the company I used to work at that I got fired from. And it was super nice to see all my former colleagues, management / leadership, as well as my peer developers. And yeah, I mean, I've been to a lot of blockchain conferences, like a lot, but still, you know, you always learn something new. Let's see if I can single out some of the things I learned. I think it was mainly a synthesis and talking through the ideas that I've been thinking about in the last few weeks. Again, same exact response as in Wikimedia. People were very, very interested in what we're doing. You don't just drop, we're building a search engine for learning resources, and people, you know, are not interested. That hasn't happened to me a single time yet. So I really believe the product that we're building, if we can implement it, it's going to be a success. I guess my thoughts were kind of challenged in the last day of DAPCon, which was I guess yesterday or on Friday, because there was a presentation by a guy who is consulting no, it's not called FOMO. Right, I just read that. It's called Foam. There was a presentation by a guy who is consulting the blockchain project entitled Foam. And one of the side projects that they're working on is a decentralized Google Maps. So one of the projects that they're working on, I think it's called Foam Map actually, is a community-driven registry of locations. And yeah, it turns out it's kind of working. Like they had over 10,000, they have by now over 10,000 submissions. I think you stake it with their native token, and then people can challenge it. And I raised my hand during the presentation and asked, like, to what extent, if they've run any like comparisons to see what percentage of the submissions are correct, what percentage of the challenges end up being sort of correct, and let's define correct as Google Maps for lack of any other better source of truth. And turns out that it's kind of sound. People challenge points because they have incorrect information, they don't have enough information, etc. So it's working out for them. That's great. If it works out, we can follow projects like these, community-driven content / information based systems. And if they succeed, we can pivot. Yeah. I guess the last thing that I'll say about Wikimedia and DAPCon is a comparison of the two cultures. Because I believe I was the only person who was at both conferences last 2 weeks. I think there was anyone who was at both. It's really, really interesting seeing the two communities, seeing their differences and similarities. Similarity is sort of this very open approach to information, non-centralized. Both communities want to topple the FANG monopoly. Blockchain people are doing it from a more technical. You guys know blockchain is very, very technical. Go to presentations and the ZK snarks and multi-party computation and distributed key generation. So very advanced cryptography topics are thrown around as if people are talking about the weather. And that's just cryptography. So blockchain community would be a little bit more technical and a little bit more entrepreneurial. And Wikipedia community has skepticism, I think, towards blockchain. I think it's sort of the mainstream skepticism, like people just raising a lot of money and like running away with it, etc. but it's very, very open and free in the truest sense of the word, like volunteerism, contributions, etc. And one of the, as I already mentioned, it's also very, very left-wing. The reason I don't like MediaWiki, so I did have a conversation with one of the people. I was telling them about Amos, and I was telling them it's very similar to Wikipedia. It's this people submit metadata about learning resources, and then we build a search engine over it. And one of the programmers was challenging me, like, you should build this on MediaWiki. And so we had a conversation about that, whether MediaWiki is the right software to build Amos. And I have to say I disagree. And I'll tell you the main 3 reasons or 4 reasons. So number 1 is, so let me start by saying that, and now we're sort of transitioning more towards the future of our project. I think that Amos should be much similar to Wikipedia than we thought until now. In particular, I think we want to build a competitor to Wikidata. So what is Wikidata? So Wikidata is a project that began development in 2006. It's a long, long time ago, and was finally released in 2013. And what is Wikidata? So it's a graph of structured information. So in Wikidata, you have classes, such as school or public institution. You have sort of objects or instances, such as AAS, the school I used to go to. And you have properties. And you also have predicates. So an example would be John Lennon is an instance of a person, and there's a predicate that John Lennon, and the predicate is called is a member of, or is part of, the Beatles. Right, so we can test this out if what I just said is actually in the database. So John Lennon has an ID of Q 1203, an instance of a human. And this is a predicate, he's part of the Beatles. And predicates can also have attributes. So that's great. It's really, really cool, right? I was also in the Wikidata lecture. Yeah, that was another thing that I did on Friday. And that was very, very interesting. So I'll tell you guys about that because that's relevant. Actually, do you guys want to take a 5-minute break? We've been talking for quite a bit. We've been talking for an hour. So let's take a 5-minute break, and I'll see you guys at 1:05. Is that okay with everyone?
Sure, yeah.
Perfect. See you guys soon. We're back. Where did we end? I think it was in building a competitor to Wikidata. So another thing I did Friday afternoon, which I forgot to say, Wikimania period, was I went to a Wikidata lecture. And that was really, really interesting. So Wikidata is this project which was first implemented in 2013. And it's this idea of having a collective shared database for structured data. Now, what are the advantages and what are the challenges of Wikidata? So number 1, the advantages. If you have a database like this, then you can very easily make translations. And essentially, one time I raised my hand and I suggested that Wikipedia info boxes, okay, the only keywords I can think of are bizarre keywords such as this one. Let's see if there's somewhere a reference to or a link to Wikipedia. Yes, there is. Let's look up for the English language, and the English language is right here. So I made the suggestion that, oh, ouch, that Wikipedia info boxes, which are these little things right here, will actually be pulled from Wikidata. Now, what's the advantage? The advantage is that we'll be able to have one source of truth and one set of translations for all of the predicates, and then you will write it once and read it in 200 languages. And the responses I got to that suggestion were mostly positive. I think that's what the Wikimedia Foundation it wants to do in the future. However, there are also challenges to Wikidata. So the challenge is that structured data is much more contentious than unstructured data. So there have been a lot of painful periods in the history of Wikipedia. If you guys are interested in the history of Wikipedia, you can find an article called Dans, which was very, very contentious a few years back, whether to call it Dansk, which is the name the city had until 1300 and from 1945, or whether to call it Danzig, which is the name the city had from 1300 to 1945. And in the end, with unstructured data, it is much, much easier to come to a common agreement. In particular, right now, the way it works is you can see here that in German it is known as Danzig. They had a vote. In the end, they agreed to call it Dansk. But they also agreed that anywhere in Wikipedia where it's in a German language, it will be called Danzig, parentheses Dansk. Anywhere where it's in an English language or any other language, it will be called Dansk, parentheses Danzig, with the exceptions that whenever it's referenced the city in a historical period from 1300 to 1945, it will also be called Danzig, parentheses Dansk. So you can essentially come to much easier agreements with unstructured data. However, I did see, I think bickering is a strong word, but I did see disagreements at that particular, even at that particular lecture about Wikidata format and structure. In particular, people were debating whether to have separate classes of libraries and library branches. So for the majority of libraries in the world, such as school libraries, the library has only one branch. So the argument goes, for the majority, we don't need separate classes. But then there are a lot of libraries, such as the National Library in Czech Republic, that are a library system, and they have a bunch of branches. Now, how do you decide whether to have for every single library two sort of references, one for the branch, one for the library system, or whether to have just one thing for everything? And I think this is something that Amos could solve. And what's the other added value of Amos? It is graph-based categorization. So even though Wikidata is technically, I guess, based on a graph, you can see that even in the homepage, the classification schema is not graph-based. And the more I think about this particular problem, the more it makes sense to me to have a graph-based classification. So just for a recap, if anyone is not familiar with the current state of Amos, if we very, very quickly open up our current project, such as Amos scraping or crawling or hydration, where I have the latest version of the Amos topic classification. Then we can see that we can see an example of a graph-based classification schema. And I think this makes a lot of sense. By the way, so what's the difference? It looks like a tree, it looks like a hierarchy. What's the difference from a graph? Well, the difference is that you can have nodes be at multiple locations. So I don't remember the exact examples, but I think it's like ethnobiology of all things. So ethnobiology is both part of biology, but it's also part of anthropology. And luckily the parser we're using, which is already built, I built this a few weeks back, it can handle that. So if nodes are referenced in multiple parts of the graph, it will know not to add a new node at this point, but rather to take this node and link it not just with biology, but also with anthropology. And the more I think about it, the more I think that graphs are the correct way to classify information in the 21st century. And now we're getting sort of to the new vision or idea for Amos. Is I don't know if this will be called Amos or if it will be called a separate name. I like the name opengraphs.io, which is a currently free domain name until somebody registers it. And what we could do is we could set up graphs into verticals. The first vertical that we'll implement is called education. And verticals are separated by the JSON representing, I guess, at least for education, but possibly for other verticals as well, the user profile. And every vertical is composed of a number of graphs. And those graphs represent a classification of a certain object. So let me give you an example. Let's have the vertical education. Now in education, we can classify a lot of things. We can classify academic resources. We can classify products, movies, people, conferences, so many things, right? And I claim that for each of these things, graphs are the ways to classify stuff. And how would this work? As I said, for each vertical, it's defined by sort of the JSON, which is the user profile that you want to submit in order to get valuable information. So for the vertical education, that JSON will be called the learning profile. And that will contain information on what you already know and the difference, which is what you don't know. And based on that, we'll be able to give you the best learning resources, the best conferences, the best, there's probably 20 of these that we could do. In fact, I made a whole list, let's say 2 weeks back. And this is by no means comprehensive in order to give the best results for any user. So to sum it all up, how do I see the future of Amos? So Amos right now is a classification project for learning resources. But I think that since each of those things that I just showed you requires a different classification scheme, then it makes a lot of sense to sort of generalize it. And in particular, since there could also exist verticals other than education, I think it makes a lot of sense to generalize the whole protocol. So this could result in an app that allows anyone to create a graph, a classification graph, as well as a community-driven approach to hydrate that graph, and then have either recommendations or searches across that information. Now, I really think this is a really interesting product, and I think that there's two ways we could approach this. Either it would be just from the front end, so you wouldn't even have to do any coding, or alternatively, we would provide this as an NPM package. So if you think about it, the closest alternative is something like, well, I guess Wikidata is like, it's opinionated, but it's collaborative. Something like Airtable is not opinionated, but it's not collaborative. And it's also based on tables. But if you think about somewhere at the intersection of those two projects, that's what Open Graphs would be. So if the tagline of Airtable is a relational database for everyone, the tagline for Open Graphs would be a graph database for everyone. So if you guys have any comments, you can either say them right now or message me on Slack, or we can continue. So I'll leave 15 seconds to see if you guys have any comments.
So are we doing Amos now or Open Graph?
So we're still building Amos. It's just, I wanted to think about where we're really going with this project. And I think where we're going with this project, let me get it from a different angle, more from a user angle, because this discussion has been very high in clouds. So I had a call with yesterday with my friend while I was cycling. And I told him at the end of the day, all that matters is what your users want, right? That's all a startup should care about. And I think we should start with a centralized approach, just because we're not a research project, we're a startup. And as soon as you start to think of how do you create monetary incentives in a Wikipedia-style project, you focus on things that are, number one, not important at the beginning, because at the beginning there's nothing to decentralize. You have 0 users when you just begin. And number two, the whole thing dissolves to sort of game theory research paper. And if that's the industry you're in, then go for it, but we're in the startup industry. So that's kind of what a lot of the discussions in April were about. I think they were a little bit too abstract. And then there's also the technical, so it's not just a game theoretical problem, it's also a technical problem. There do exist decentralized databases, BigChainDB. There's this new one that I found called TeaseDB. But even putting aside the game theory, which is the hardest part, from a technical perspective, we don't know how scalable these databases are, how good they're at indexing, how good they're at queries, etc. So what I told my friend yesterday was, as a startup, you first need to focus on product market fit. And second thing you need to focus once you achieve that is on doing what your users want. And so the way I see it is we start off with a centralized approach, Neo4j, graph database, beautiful stuff. Oops, I deleted something. Neo4j, beautiful stuff. And once we get product market fit, we ask our users what they want. If they don't want us to decentralize and they want us to build new features or expand the community growth, we'll do that. But I think there's a very, very high chance that they will want us to renounce control of the database. in some level. Maybe it's something like Wikidata, where it's kind of a community-driven collaboration, but on a technical level, it's still centralized. Or maybe it's something where even on like an incentive layer, it's decentralized. Why do I think that the community will want this? Precisely because we have a historical example. Wikipedia used to be for-profit. It used to even be all rights reserved. Then it turned to copyleft, and then it even turned to nonprofit and no ads. As I've learned by attending Wikimania, by talking with people, and also by reading the excellent book. Really recommend this book. It's called Wikipedia Revolution. Okay, well, that didn't work out. But if you look up Wikipedia Revolution, you'll find it. Bottom line, long story short, we're going to build Amos in exactly the same way as we thought, from a technical perspective. And and then we'll ask our users what they want us to do. Okay, let's call this pivot, and then let's call challenges. So now let's talk about the actual implementation, not from infrastructure level / governance level, but from an actual user level. And with that, I think we can talk about what we've been working on the last month and a half. So I've been working on this project, which I call Amos Scraping. And the goal was to crawl and classify 9,000 books. I achieved the first goal. So yeah, I'm not going to go into depth. There's even a call on this on our Zoom cloud where I talk about this. But the bottom line is the scraping was very easy. The classification was very hard. So in the end, I ended up with something that looks approximately like this, which is a list of 20,000 tags. And using some data processing, I have been able to remove, by remove I mean classify, succeed about 4,000 of those tags. But I still have about 16,000 that are remaining. And there just isn't a very good way to do this. So I tried a lot of things. I even spent some time actually like hard coding this. I spent some more time hard coding this stuff. I ran some processing. So this is a function that maps an array and at the same time pipes each element through a bunch of functions. It's really cool because I just got bored of writing .map.pipe, so I just made .mp. And also I was removing some things that I hard-coded, some arrays that I hard-coded, as well as some things that rely on regex. But I even like sort of made this, I even made this like, I generalized regex, you could say. So this is essentially a list of possibilities. So this regex, this argument in this function will match anything that has the string politics of in a certain country in it. And I believe, unless I'm mistaken, it actually uses as match in array. It actually uses, yeah, it actually uses regex under the hood. So that's pretty cool. Initially, I was like building my own regex parser. I was over here, but then I was like, no, that is not gonna work. So I just ended up like putting it all into like one big regex, which is like maybe, 1,000 characters of code or 20,000, who knows? But it turns out regex doesn't really have limitations on how many characters it can have. As long as it fits in your computer memory, what's the problem? Bottom line is, despite doing a lot of work, a lot of thinking about this, and a lot of Adderall infused work, I still wasn't able to get this to a level where it would be good. We should ditch books right now, and we should pivot. And the pivot is the following. We will do what essentially everyone has said we should do, and I was wrong, and I admit it. We should focus just on one single topic. So from now on, I propose we focus just on computer science. So Amos, from today, I propose is the best way to get personalized and customized learning paths in computer science. So what are the implications? We need a topic graph, and we need hydration. And we can talk about that more in like a product call, because this is entitled a regular call, so it should be more of a high-level review.
Even computer science is a huge space.
That's exactly the point. You don't want to do more than that. What would be the next topics? I think the next topics can be either mathematics or software engineering. But when I say computer science, this does not mean learning React. That will not be part of it. This will be the theory behind the code, not the code itself. The code itself goes into software engineering. And so I think we should have a product call, either today or tomorrow, where we discuss the details. And with that, I think we're almost finished. So what are the plans and challenges for the next few weeks? So one of the plans is, I guess, to finalize the designs. Then to actually implement them. So this is one of our challenges. I'm not sure how we're doing on the front end side. Last time I spoke with Sultan, he was busy. So I will try to get us a front-end developer within the next 2 to 3 days. If I fail, I will code it myself. But I don't want to go back to the last month and a half when I was just doing a lot of work and there was nobody to coordinate the different efforts. I think we should transition to Lerna. And I think we should do that tomorrow. So look up, how do you spell it? I think it's spelled like this. Look up Lerna/Lerna on GitHub. And yeah, we should also finish the backend. Let's do this in 2 weeks. Then let's launch beta. So let's launch beta.amos.app. And amos.app will redirect, but it's still good to say straight directly in the domain name that this is a beta product. Everything might change. All data might be lost. And last but not least, I think we should also integrate GitHub integration, because finally we actually have an audience. Until now, when somebody asked me what's the target audience, I was clueless. My best answer was, what's Wikipedia's target audience? But I don't think that's a very good answer for the very first launch. Again, let's talk about this in the product call. And then let's try to get user feedback. And then let's launch, ideally, like maybe Amos 1.0. And I think the deadline for this is 48 hours before Y Combinator deadline. And why is it 48 hours? Because I believe, as I thought about it one time when I go high, is 48 hours is the minimum time that you can demonstrate traction. So in Amos Beta, which we're planning to launch in 2 weeks, it will be just for friends and family. And once we're happy, we will launch the full product, which me and everyone in the team will spend their context and energy for 48 hours to growth hack it as much as they can. I read a blog post by the guy who wrote, "How do you get #1 on Product Hunt?" And he said that in the 24 hours, so the key to get #1 on Product Hunt is you launch 0001 PDT. So you launch 0001 Pacific Daylight Time, which is the time that producthunt.com uses. That gives you 24 hours to achieve the most traction. And he said that in those 24 hours, he slept about 4. So that time will be a lot of growth hacking on the internet, and ideally we'll be able to demonstrate. It will be our first release, and we could apply to Y Combinator not having launched, but the Y Combinator deadline, the Y Combinator application form. Let's bring it up. This is how it currently looks, very quickly, because I think we want to be ending the call soon. Solvio Foundation, solvio.org, amos.app. This might be changed. Where do you currently live? Remote, Europe, US, India. After, I'm planning to be based in Bay Area. We'll add all the co-founders here. Let's get rid of this. I was testing the character limits. Turns out there is no character limit. And we want to fill this out. Ideally, yeah. So bottom line is we could apply there not having launched. So there is a specific question which is entitled. I thought there was a question. Oh yeah, here. Like, have you launched? Do you have a demo? But I just think that it's much better if we do have a demo, if we do have a product. And last but not least, I think it's much better if we can, in this question, actually write, we were #1 on Product Hunt. Last but not least, we will fill this application out 1 week before the deadline. So let's write that down. September 18. And we will send it to amazing people. If you guys know amazing people, let me know. I would send it to my friend Martin, who has previously applied and secured an interview at Y Combinator, and maybe some other people that I will think about in order for them to proofread it. Then we will make the changes. Then we'll launch Amos 1.0, and then the last hour before the deadline, we will submit it, the application, having included our current traction. Sound good? I don't think that I forgot to say anything. I think this was, from my side, I feel like I gave a lot of information. Do you guys feel like this, do you guys feel like you gained a lot of information in this call?
Yeah, I think we are good.
It's been good.
So I will stop the sharing now, and we can have a discussion. So thanks everyone for watching. If you'd like to join the community, we are back and live on solvio.discourse.group, where we will be posting from now on not just all of the public videos, but also ideally a lot of the discussions about the future and the present of the products. See you later.